Well, I didn't think we were going to have three podcasts today, but here we are. Holy hell.
Fourth recorded, but
Fourth recording.
the
Wink,
other
wink.
one's may come out tomorrow.
There you go. Little insider information right there. Welcome back to another edition of the Penn State 365 podcast. I'm your host, Richie O'Leary, joined as always, my co-host, Dylan Callahan-Crawley. Dylan, Penn State pulled off the unthinkable, has just flipped 5.94 star. That's like as high as a 4 star as you can get, just so you know. 164 in the country and number 5 overall tight end in the 2025 class in Southern Lehigh High School's Andrew Olesh. Dylan, how did this one come about? I know he visited campus recently back in
Yeah,
early November, but holy hell, man. We were here in Michigan ever since that Bryce Underwood flip.
yeah. No, this is a recruitment that I mean, I don't want to say shocker because Penn State has always been in this one. We were discussing them being in this one for quite a while and this and that, but it's still a little bit of a shocker because they had to go up against both not just Michigan but Oregon in this one. Who just lost out on another big four-star tight end, Lincoln Cure, earlier this week,
Mm-hmm.
to win this battle. I mean, if I imagine Oregon was willing to, uh, you know, offer a pretty penny for Parrish, and we know what Parrish. Sorry, Olish. I'm focused half on
You're good.
a Minnesota story, but with Olish, I'm sure Oregon was offering a nice pretty penny. And we know
Mm-hmm.
Michigan can offer a pretty penny as well after what they've done in recent weeks in terms of landing some major flips. So, yeah, just what a win here at the end of the cycle for James Franklin, for Ty Howe.
Huge.
Absolutely huge. He committed to Michigan in July. Penn State, to their credit, just never laid off the gas. They continued to chip away, got him on campus in November, and kept going at it up until he announced here on Friday. And that's again just a major recruiting win for this program. It's not even necessarily a position that they needed to have a win like this
They
in.
already had a 4 star. They
They're
got a
yeah,
3 star flip. Like,
exactly. So I mean, it's a big win in the fact that they were able to go toe to toe with two programs that are really red hot on the recruiting trail and land such an important prospect.
I do want to go back to something. Director of, I actually don't know what his exact title is, but one of the guys on the recruiting staff yesterday tweeted this, and I think this goes to show more about what Penn State's doing and how they're building it the right way. Relationships still and will always matter. That was Khalil Ahmad, one of the recruiting guys, and he put "real" in caps for relationships instead of spelling it a little differently, obviously.
Yeah,
But the fact that you know for a fact, and I can almost guarantee you that Oregon and Michigan probably offered him more money in Andrew Olesh. But at the end of the
yeah,
day, it was still the relationship he had with the coaching staff, with Ty Howell, with Franklin, with everyone
yeah,
else that was able to sell him on staying home and playing for the Nittany Lions. Now, the other thing that's probably
yeah,
selling him is the fact that, a lot of Pennsylvania guys have left, specifically, say, a Julian Fleming,
yeah,
former 5 star, and had to come back, or didn't have to come back, but came back a couple years later, probably regretting his decision a little bit. On top of all of it, you're going to have the first Mackey Award winner in Penn State history in, what, a couple weeks, probably? More than likely, if I had to guess.
yeah.
Or whenever they announced that. I forget when it is.
December. It used to be December 9th, but I can't. I
So
don't think
maybe it is
it's.
this weekend. But either way,
Um,
it doesn't matter. He's winning it. Like he's gotta. If he doesn't win it, I
right,
personally will walk to the Mackey Award office and personally protest in front of it with a picket sign.
right. Yeah, it's coming up this month though, no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
No, yeah, I think it's major to keep, like you said, guys have left and come back, much like Julian Fleming. Um, I think it's important to land him because you don't want to become the safety school, right?
No,
You don't
never.
want to become the school that, if, you know, oh, it didn't work out at wherever I went, I could just go back home, play for Penn State.
Mhm.
I mean, that's great. It's great that it worked out for Julian Fleming, who's been a nice story this year. It's great that it worked out for Nolan Rucci, but you don't want it to become necessarily a trend where the in-state kids are going to leave thinking, if it doesn't work out, I can always go to Penn State later. You want to land these kids early,
Yeah.
and often. Because the other thing we've noticed is a lot of these kids aren't developing when they leave Pennsylvania. Maybe if they go to Penn State, they would develop at a higher rate. I mean,
You can
Nolan
argue.
Richie couldn't gain weight at Wisconsin. He spent 20 minutes in Penn State's weight room this offseason and gained 20 pounds. I mean, it is what it is. But no, it's just a massive recruiting win for Penn State in every sense of the word, and especially in keeping an elite in-state prospect home. Let me bring up our Pennsylvania rankings here.
I'm looking at it now. I expect them to change one more time. They will change one more time because we have an update coming after January, February, I forget. But right now, Zahir Mathis, Anthony Sacca, and then Andrew Olesh are the top three. Jabri
Yeah.
Coleman, and then Alex Tatch. So that's three of the top five right there. But I will say, Zahir Mathis probably will not retain that top spot if I
Yeah, I
had to
don't think
guess.
Zahir Mathis should retain that top spot. Um, I think you can argue that Olish is the top talent in Pennsylvania. Um, I I think you can argue a guy like Jabri Coleman could even be higher. A guy like Alex Tash can be higher. I mean, Penn State has struggled in state a little bit in the last few years, but this
Hmm.
cycle was really good. You look at the top 11; they landed what, five guys now out of that top 11. That's huge for them, and they're off to a solid start at that 2026 class as well. When you look at it, so they have a lot of momentum in state.
Hmm.
You look ahead of that 2026 class. Kevin Brown's already committed. Messiah Mickens is already committed. Matt Sieg is already committed. And they're also in good spot for Joey O'Brien, the number four player in the state, and Tyler Merrill. They're going to fight tooth and nail for as well. So I mean, there's a realistic chance that Penn State lands the top five talents in the 2026 recruiting class out of Pennsylvania as well. Um, but I think this is it's also a big win for Penn State in the fact that it kind of reestablishes them as, I think, a not a force on the recruiting trail, but kind of reminds people that Penn State can still go toe to toe with the big dogs on the recruiting trail. Because yeah, like you said, Oregon and Michigan probably absolutely offered more money, but I have to assume that Penn State still had to offer a pretty
Oh,
uh,
100%.
quality NIL deal in order here to land him. Not saying NIL was the biggest need here for in Andrew Olesh's recruitment, but I'm
Hmm.
sure it didn't hurt as well. So I think in that aspect, it's also really big for Penn State.
Hmm.
But this is another tight end too that can realistically make an impact early in his career. Now, will the depth chart allow him to make that impact? Maybe not. He still needs to. Uh, Looking at the
It's got to put on
He's
some
at
muscle. I
250. He's
mean,
at 215 pounds, so he still needs to add 30 pounds of weight.
give or
Um,
take. Yeah.
30, 40 pounds of weight. So maybe not impacting as a true freshman, but as a redshirt freshman, could see that. Penn State's tight end room, you know, it will probably have a few less guys come the 2026 season anyway, because Claude Dinkins is somebody who go to the NFL. Depending
Hmm.
on what type of season Andrew Rappleyea has next year, he's a guy who's has the talent to eventually be an NFL caliber player, and likely we'll see a transfer portal entry or two at somewhere along the way as well. But Andrew Olish is jumps to in terms of pure talent and pure athleticism, jumps to the top of maybe that tight end room as a whole, which is really impressive when you think about it, because Andrew Appier is a stud
Luke
player
Reynolds is
himself.
a stud.
Luke Reynolds is a stud. Um, Claude Dinkins isn't too shabby either. Um, yeah, and we already saw Jerry Krause leave, so that's one. I'll be interested to see if anybody else leaves before next season, but that is a hell of a tight end room. One of the it has to be the deepest tight end room in the country, in my opinion. And I'll be interested to see how many of those guys we see next fall.
And you look at the past, I'm not even talking like recent past, I should say. Tyler Warren, Theo Johnson, the list goes on, but Pat Fryermuth, Mike Gesicki.
Yeah,
You could, I'm probably missing like five others, but, and then on top of it, like you see flashes of a true freshman in Luke Reynolds.
yeah,
At this point, you know how involved Tyler Warren was this year? You'd almost be dumb as a tight end recruit who has a Penn State offer not to commit to Penn State, I feel like at this point. And that might sound like a homerism to some people, but they have just used Tyler Warren as a quarterback, wide receiver, slot receiver, offensive lineman, a center at one point, like
punter.
punter. Like the man can do everything. So if you see that as a tight end and you look at other programs where it's like, oh, I get to block like 70% of the time and I might catch a couple passes, or I can go to Penn State where the guy's got going to have 1,000 yards when it's all said and done, probably. So it's like,
Yeah, 11 seasons under James Franklin.
mhm,
Now he didn't recruit all these guys; he recruited most of
yeah,
them. Since he's been at Penn State, his starting tight ends have been Jesse James, NFL for
yeah,
several years, Mike Gesicki, NFL for several years,
still there.
high
Yep.
draft pick, second, third round pick,
Second,
Pat
I believe.
Fryermuth, high draft pick,
Stud.
Brennan Strange, NFL has a nice role with the Jaguars.
Has a couple
Was
tight ends this year, I think.
was a
At least
second
one. At least one
yeah
touchdown. I said
yeah
tight ends. Yeah,
was a
you know what I
second
mean.
round pick. Theo Johnson with the Giants is starting as a rookie, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
He was a fourth round pick. Tyler Warren has a chance to be a first round pick, and that's not to mention guys like Kyle Carter, Nick Bowers, who both had small stints in the NFL. But that is six tight ends who have mostly been third round picks or higher. Uh, Two guys in Carter and Bowers who had cups of coffee, and all of them have. I mean, James, Gesicki, Fryermuth, Strange, Johnson, Warren have all been on the roster. I mean, Gesicki was on the roster at the same time for at least one season as James, Fryermuth as Gesicki. So I mean, they
Mm-hmm.
just kept on learning from each other, and it has helped Penn State become, I think, tight end U. Iowa has done a great job at producing tight ends themselves, but this run for James Franklin and Penn State is kind of hard to argue with. And you look at that tight end room they have put together right now. If everything pans out, you got another. I mean, I think Dinkins is going to get a shot in the NFL, even though he's not going to probably put up huge stats at any point in his career.
Mm-hmm.
And then Rapier and Reynolds both have insanely high ceilings and could end up high picks themselves. I mean, the run that they have, the talent they have amassed in that room, incredible, and it's a testament to James Franklin, but also somebody who doesn't deserve a lot of credit, but has done a tremendous job recruiting since he's taken over that tight end position. Is Ty Howell. Um, he's
Yeah.
he is. I mean, under his watch, Tyler Warren has gone from a good tight end, even great tight end, to the best tight end in the country and a potential first round draft pick.
Yeah. I don't think you can debate it at all. Like he might be the best tight end coach in the country.
He's up there. He's absolutely up there.
And it also helps when, you have this guy named Andy Koltonicki that's your usually offensive coordinators or OCs/QBs coaches. Occasionally you'll see an OC/wide receivers coach. But Andy Koltonicki's got a superior background in tight ends as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I
Uh,
forgot to even mention that. But
and I think what helps with Howell as well as a former offensive lineman. So I mean, one of the big areas that we've seen Warren's game step up is his blocking,
mhm.
and these tight ends being able to block and being good blockers is only going to help raise their draft stock too. And
Yeah,
also kind of a
it's huge.
small one, and we'll see if Penn State can pull off the second part of this. But it's a recruitment over Oregon one day before the Big Ten championship game. So in battle number one of the weekend, Penn State's coming out on top, and now we'll see if Penn State can come out on top on Saturday in the as big of a recruiting win this is. I think Saturday may be a little bit bigger of a win if Penn State can pull that off.
Just a little bit. I mean, Andrew Olesh isn't the number one recruit in the country, but to be fair, he's probably number one on their board for tight end.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you this. How does this affect, say, I don't know, top 100, number 93, four-star quarterback Bryce Baker? I know, like, obviously there was some talk that
Yeah.
Bryce Underwood had a little bit of an effect on him. Maybe he could bring his own little Bryce to, not little Bryce, very big Bryce, actually, to Penn State.
Yeah, I mean, that would be interesting, right? Because we thought that maybe Bryce Underwood's commitment to Michigan would change this commitment for Andrew Olesh or keep him
Mm-hmm.
committed to the Wolverines, and ultimately did it. Um, but I mean, if Bryce Baker wants talent around him, it's definitely, I mean, Penn State's definitely the place to be. That being said, we said many, many times on here, Bryce Baker is committed to North Carolina for much more than the coaching staff and for
Mm-hmm.
those around him. He's committed to North Carolina because,
On point here.
he really seems to love the program, love the university, love Chapel Hill, all that. So we'll see. He's certainly going to give UNC every chance, it seems here, to keep him
Mm-hmm.
around. But if he comes to Penn State, he's going to, be surrounded by some pretty elite talent.
Yeah, obviously a local kid too, North Carolina.
Yeah,
I might be saying it in a different pod too, or said it earlier. I forget. That it is tough. It is tough to blame those kids when they stay home, and that's what Andrew Olesh just did. So,
right.
congrats to him on his commitment. Very big news for Penn State to land this, not even land him, but to flip him from, I guess you could say, a quote unquote conference rival, peer, whatever you want to call it. Um, Kind of a FU to Michigan, who's also been red hot, like you mentioned, on the recruiting trail. Oregon's been red hot on the recruiting trail, so big win for Penn
Yeah,
State.
I mean, Oregon stole. Oregon kind of stole one from Penn State earlier in the cycle on Brandon
That is
Finney.
true. That is very
Um,
true.
and maybe this isn't Penn State stealing one back from Oregon necessarily, but
A little bit.
Oregon was this was we cannot trust enough how big of a true three-team race this was going into the final hours. Um, I mean, last time I checked in with anybody, it was as of last night, nobody knew where he was going. Um, in terms of those who I talked to with connections to Michigan and Oregon, and us with Penn State. I mean, nobody knew where he was going, and so to a degree, this is a surprise for all of us.
Yeah, huge news though. I can't understate that enough or overstate that enough. Very big news, very big win. For more info, we're gonna have we have an article up already. We'll probably have a coach speak article up shortly. Definitely check us out on pennstate.rivals.com. There's a ton of content on there. Have a feeling you'll be hearing from us sooner than later in terms of a podcast, as Dylan hinted at before at the beginning of the show. Um, that's really it, though. Where does this actually, real quick before we sign off, where does this put Penn State's class? Because now it might be, is it top 15 now? I don't know. It's close. It was number 16 before this. They haven't announced his signing yet, technically, but I guess you have to wait for the paperwork and all that
Yeah,
nonsense.
after paperwork, I don't think we're going to have one of those scenarios of we've seen in the past that a player commits to a school and then, you know,
Yeah.
the paperwork never comes in and suddenly they sign with another program. Don't think
Yeah,
that
no.
one's happening here.
I think they'll be
Um,
good here, to
yeah.
be honest. So, but yeah, for me and Dylan, that's another episode of the Penn State 365 podcast. Signing off.